district's what? This is the meeting of the Water Supply Planning Committee of the Water Management District. It's May 6th. And one of the committee members is here, Mark Eisenhardt, and one is absent.
No, Ian's here.
He is? Where?
The mayor has joined us.
Yes. I'm right here.
Where? Where are you? I'm glad you're here.
I'll turn on my camera in a few minutes.
Okay. So let's correct the record. All three committee members are here. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda?
No, they're not.
Okay. Then
Chair Paul, I'll take a roll call for the record.
Okay.
Director Oglesby.
Here.
Director Eisenhardt.
Here.
Chair Paul.
Here.
All three committee members are present.
Okay. Public comment. Do we have any members of the public on either in the room at the district office or online?
No, we have 3 attendees, but no hands are raised.
Okay, thank you. The public can comment on the individual items as we address them also. So speak up or raise your hand if members of the public want to speak. For now, we can go to the first item, the adoption of the minutes from the March 5th committee meeting. Any corrections or comments? I was there and I have no corrections. Anyone else have corrections?
So I wasn't there. Normally I abstain from voting on minutes if I wasn't at the last meeting. Mayor Oglesby, were you at the last meeting?
No, he was not.
No, I was not. I have no problem moving the minutes. I'll support moving the minutes.
Okay. Was that a motion?
Yes, I moved the adoption of the minutes.
Okay, I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now that we got 2, I'll do my usual abstain.
Okay. So the minutes are adopted. For what it's worth. Okay. So now.
Great.
Here we go. Second item.
Yeah, so this item is an update on the Public Utilities Commission proceeding called Phase 2 of the application for approval of the water purchase agreement for the Pure Water Monterey expansion. But Phase 2 is solely dedicated to a relook at the supply and demand forecast for the future that kind of underpins the need or lack thereof, depending on your opinion, of the Cal-Am desal plant. I included in the packet our opening brief and Cal-Am's opening brief. What was not included were the opening briefs of Monterey One Water, City of Marina, Marina Coast Water District, and the Public Advocate's Office. I think you can get a flavor of the disparity between the parties. All those parties, the other interveners that I mentioned, pretty much land squarely on the same side of the fence as does the district in believing that the scenario that's been painted by Cal-Am overstates demand and understates supplies available. They enter into this.
Say that last thing again.
The belief of all the interveners, other than the applicant being Cal-Am, is that Cal-Am's numbers tend to overstate the demand into the future. So customer demand for residential water and non-residential water, commercial use, and understates the supplies available. Cal-Am spends a great deal of time talking about what's firm supply and what is less available in supply. So I wanted...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to check, though, before we continue, see if the other committee members have read the briefs or any of the briefs. Have you read our brief, Mark and Ian?
I'm looking at it right now, real time.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
I've read our brief, and I was reading Marina Coast Water District's brief, so both very excellent in my opinion. Okay, I just
yeah,
wanted
and I'm
to
gonna
see how you know to what extent you need to how much you need to
yeah,
get the
well, and I'm
directors
just
up to
gonna
speed.
and I'm not gonna really get into the details except to say that I'm gonna screen share if I can make that happen. And just center on a few of the incongruities, I guess is a term I'll use. Let's see. So this is a table from CalAm's supplemental testimony from last December. And this table is repeated in their opening brief. So you'll see something very much like this. And this is how the demand numbers are estimated. So if you can see my cursor moving around, they start with service area population consistent with the growth forecast from AMBAG, from the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. And so you look at the increase in population growth, apply a gallons per customer per day figure rather, and number of people times the number of gallons per customer per day times 365 days gives you a total residential demand. And these are in 5-year increments. So beginning 2025 out through 2050. And we generally agree with that approach. Our line of disagreement was they, meaning CalAm, assumes an actual increase in residential usage with the advent of a new water supply coming online, which kind of flies in the face of current regulatory demands for a decrease of internal residential water usage in the home with targets mandated for 2030. It's in Congress with price elasticity that let's assume a new desal plant comes online in 2030 and the revenue requirement of CalAm's goes up by 50%. So the cost of water would go up, and they're showing an increase in gallons per capita per day use. Our approach did not involve the use of gallons per capita per day. We just took water usage on the residential sector today and grew it by the growth rate for each of the cities based on the AMBAG population growth rate. So we map production for customer service to the growth rate by city and then add up all the cities again, plus the unincorporated area. I want to give you a little teaser that the county's regional housing needs assessment, its housing element, is now out in draft form. And the county is looking to stick about 5,000 housing units inside the service area, with about 2,500 in Carmel Valley and about 2,500 in the Highway 68 corridor. What's interesting is at 2.3 people per house, as a rough rule of thumb, but let's just say 2 people per house, that is 5,000 times 2, 10,000 new people on the Monterey Peninsula living in the unincorporated areas on top of population growth in each of the 6 cities. Well, if you look at AMBAG's 25-year population forecast, that's actually more people in the unincorporated county just here on the peninsula than in the entire county's population forecast. So one explanation would be, well, people are moving closer to their jobs and out of, let's say the city of Marina or the city of Salinas. Well, that would mean that their population would have to go down a similar amount if it's just moving from one jurisdiction to the other. But that's not what we're seeing in the population forecast. So once again, we have now a housing forecast that reaches a different conclusion than the population forecast, both having been done by the same forecaster, AMBAG. So just kind of hold on to that this inconsistency between what housing implies and what population implies is going to remain an issue as we do the allocation of water to the jurisdictions. But anyway, here is the residential demand forecast. Now, what I wanted you to see is where some of the confusion lies. So you look down here, legal lots of record, and they're showing homes being built, single family homes and multifamily homes, which all have water usage. Well, we all know an empty home, unless there's a leak, does not use water. So what's implied behind these numbers for single and multi-residential is that there are people using water in those homes, these that are built on legal lots of record. And again, one of the fallacies in the CalAm forecast is Ian Crooks had said, well, it's unclear how many of these homes will be built on legal lots of record and how many will be built elsewhere. There is no other place that homes can be built. They're all built on legal lots of record. Back in 2012, when the legal lots of record was first introduced to the desalination, the MPWSP application, it was used as a proxy for population, not as an addition to population. So we've got population up top, resulting in residential water demand. And then we have implied populations down here in these single and multifamily homes. And then you have what's called RHNA demand. This is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment demand, which Mr. O'Halloran testified is over and above, that this is demand that's regulatory mandated. But again, it's people using water in homes. So now we either have this conundrum of, are there additional population that's implied by these residential lots of record and RHNA demands that aren't included in the demographic population up above, or are they already included in the population up above and therefore reflected in the residential demand number here? So this is something that's been going back and forth through our testimony, Marina Coast's testimony, CalAm's testimony, that we can only hope that the judge comes down and says, this is very confusing. Are you counting the same people 3 times? Or are you saying that there's people counted first up in population and then there's more people down here that are counted and they're just not accounted for in the same manner as the people up above are accounted for? So that's one of the ongoing issues on the demand side.
Can I ask a question on that?
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
So this is ridiculous. Like, this should not be the methodology. Forget the numbers. I'm not talking about the numbers. Just everything you just talked about on this one piece of paper. This disagreement, let's just say, over methodology in calculating demand. How could this possibly be the case? We're now in the what century we're in? I mean, how long have we been looking at demand issues? How could anybody possibly be allowing creative and artful demand calculations? Isn't there a standard? I mean, by now, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
And then excuse my ignorance, right? Because I don't know, right? It just seems to me that, you know, we could talk about the numbers and have disagreements about them, but when we're talking about methodology for calculating demand, how could you just make it your own methodology up? And how could the CPUC judge even consider something that was homegrown and made up? Isn't there, you know, a place to go for how to do this?
Yeah, great question. The answer is there's not really a place to go. But conceptually, the idea of a third-party population forecast or a third-party forecast in, you know, non-residential water use, we're using the proxy of the job growth projection of AMBAG, which is what CalAm does as well. So those 2 basic principles are pretty firmly rooted in demand forecasting. Back when I used to do demand forecasting at PG&E, way back in the 80s, you had two parts to your forecast. One would be you would have an energy forecast, which is the gigawatt hours or kilowatt hours going forward. And that was all based on population and, basically econometric statistics based on job growth, commercial growth, and population growth. But then you also had to estimate peak demand. And in the case of energy for PG&E, we were primarily looking at the number of air conditioners in conditioned spaces in the Central Valley, because that would be the driver for peak demand. Here too, you do have to look at peak hour, maximum day, but those typically can be met by storage. And when I say storage, I don't mean by water in tanks in advance of the hottest day of the year, but I mean water in your aquifers that if all your wells are working, you basically you look at your system and then you say, all right, let's take our biggest well offline. Can we still meet our peak demand? And the answer is typically yes, you can if all the rest of your wells are working, or if you've done well maintenance. So if you've got storage in the ground, then the peak is not really the driver. It's the annual amount needed to meet, every day of the year, total annual demand. And so that total annual demand really is driven by, population for residential use and commercial expansion for non-residential water use. So you've touched on one of our concerns, which is if you've got 5 interveners who all say one thing and one party who says the other thing, does the judge at least act human enough to say, what's going on here? What's the motivations? Why would they be different for one
Director
party?
Eisenhart, clearly these issues of supply and demand are central to this case. That's why the ALJ set an entire phase of this proceeding, phase 2, to focus only on supply and demand issues, wanting to have the best evidence before the commission as to what historic demand has been, what is present demand, what is future demand, and what are the reasons for that. And that's what the testimony went to.
Yeah. And I think the district, together with Marina Coast and some other parties, made a good record on that. The judge has a good record to work with. And just to go to the other side of the equation, the other area of disagreement is really whether there's this giant disparity between water available from the expansion of Pure Water Monterey in a drought year versus a normal year, and whether aquifer storage and recovery has been appropriately depicted. And addressing the second one first, we believe that, we know for a fact that the consultant that was relied on who gave CalAm the 0 figure improperly evaluated the project. They were assuming that only wastewater was used for the base Pure Water Monterey project, and then said, well, in a drought, that wastewater is going to be down, and based on these numbers, there would be no water available for the expansion. And they neglected to actually understand that the base project does not use 100% wastewater, that it's using reclamation ditch water, Blanco drain water, and it has gone, 3 years of operation. It's never used 100% wastewater. It's never relied on the total wastewater stream. And then there's a second assumption that the third-party consultant made, which was that the Marina Coast Water District's take of Pure Water Monterey water was coming from the same wastewater, when in fact it's actually coming from water that for 25 years has been used by the growers that they're no longer going to have access to.
So there were two mistaken assumptions in the very beginning analysis by this third party. And so it will never be zero. And the math that they use is unsupportable. And then the 1100 was taken from, it's somewhat amusing, but there's a 1 year minimum delivery guarantee in the water purchase agreement of 4,600 acre feet. And they said, well, the base project's going to deliver 3,500. So that must mean that in a drought year, in an off year, there's only 1,100, 3,500. So 1,100.
That's very scientific, isn't it?
Well, and so what's interesting is in the existing contract, there's also a minimum delivery, and the minimum delivery amount was set at 80% of the regular annual amount. So 80% of 3,500 is the current mark, and the 4,600 in the new agreement is 80% of 5,750. So it had nothing to do with drought, and it wasn't calculated based on drought. It was calculated based on 80% of total delivery expected. And so this column marked drought 0 to 1,100. Both bookends, the 0 and the 1,100, have no basis in actual fact. One is based on an improperly designed memorandum by Hazen and Sawyer, and the other is designed by a convenient look at what the minimum delivery requirement would be in a single year. And in fact, if you were to deliver the minimum amount 2 years in a row, you're actually in default under the water purchase agreement, and there's financial penalties. And of course, you can have 2 drought years in a row. So we never would have entered into an agreement where the minimum delivery amount's based on a drought that actually could happen 2 years in a row and accept financial penalties. So it was a convenient interpretation of a term from the contract that actually has no bearing or basis in drought. So hopefully the work that, in the opening brief that Monterey One Water submitted clarifies that issue. I know we attempted to clarify it a little bit as well. Then you go to ASR, and this normal year projection of 470, again, was derived by a third-party consultant based on 59 years worth of hydrologic data. But what it looks at is simply the confidence interval or the probability of being able to deliver in any year of a 5-year period with no expectation of storage. So it's basically saying in any 5-year period with 90% confidence, you will get enough rainfall and stream flow to get 470 acre feet a year reliably during a normal period. But in drought, that will drop to 0. The exact same data shows that if you save the water from the good years in the ground, then you have more than enough water to make up for the bad years, and you will never be at 0 because you use storage. That's what the S in ASR stands for. But the consultant who did the memo, his defense was, I was never asked to look at storage. Well, they're modeling a project to operate in a manner in which it was not designed. It's designed to store water from year to year. And we've run Monte Carlo simulation, and some of you have seen some of those results, that if you actually start with some storage and you don't start in drought, you can go the whole 59-year period and never have a 0. And in fact, you can average 1,210 acre feet per year for any year. And so the normal should be 1,210, and the drought should be 1,210, because in every year of the 59-year cycle, including drought years, your storage offsets your dry years, and you're able to run on average at the average. So that's how it's supposed to work. So again, there, significant difference in assumptions. And the point we've been trying to make is that if you discount supply and overstate demand, then you create a crisis that happens much sooner than where we see these two lines crossing off in the future. So that's been, basically the subject matter of all of the submittals. It's hard to get some of these concepts across. There are other things that we disagree on as well, not the least of which, just a small item, is the value of Malpaso entitlements or the value of the Seaside desalination plant. If the water is delivered through a CalAm meter in CalAm's system, which it is, and let's take, for example, a building in Seaside. I'm sorry, a building in Sand City. Then if that is delivered through a CalAm meter, CalAm should be seeing it as demand on its system. And a new building coming in next month would be a new connection. And if that new connection is going through CalAm's meter, it should be part of CalAm's residential or non-residential forecast, because that's what you're doing is computing future demand. But if it comes online, but they had purchased an entitlement from the Sand City desal plant, and Sand City said, great, now you can get a water permit, you can get a meter set, and you can come online, it's still going through the CalAm meter. It's still part of the CalAm demand. So as long as it's on the demand side of the equation, it needs to be on the supply side. And so CalAm will deliver from the desalination plant, the Sand City desalination plant, that additional acre foot to serve that new demand. So in fact, Sand City's entitlement is actually available supply to CalAm to meet that demand. Same thing for Malpaso entitlement, same thing for any entitlement, and the supply is available to CalAm in addition to its own, call them homegrown supplies. Their homegrown supplies would be their water right from the Seaside Basin, their water right from the Carmel River, their rights to pure water Monterey water. If they do get to build their desal plant, their rights to their desal plant. But if they're delivering water that, let's say, comes from the Eastwood well, which supplies about 80 acre feet a year for use against the Malpaso entitlements, that is a supply that's fully available to CalAm to meet 80 acre feet of Malpaso demand. So you need to count it on the supply side as well. And they failed to do that in a number of occasions, but we tried to quibble a little less over that because they're small amounts of water, and the big issues are really the big drivers of the big numbers. So we're kind of sticking to the double and triple counting issue on the demand side and the undervaluation of ASR and pure water expansion on the supply side. But that's, hopefully you see that kind of pop off the pages of at least these two briefs. And as Director Pauls pointed out, the other briefs kind of reinforce the same arguments.
And these are the reply, these are our opening briefs. We have a reply brief opportunity that comes at the end of the month on Tuesday, May 28th is when it needs to be filed. So, and we'll be compiling our reply brief materials. They're simultaneous reply briefs for all parties.
But it really goes straight back to Director Eisenhardt's point, which is the judge should be saying, isn't there some standard here? Why is there such a difference? And, get everybody in the room, say, all right, whack them on the side of the head. Which one of you is telling me the wrong story and why?
Well, but we're beyond that stage because the administrative record has closed. So we're in the briefing stage.
Yeah.
We have the site to the record, and it's there and capable of being cited to.
Any prediction?
I'm sorry?
No
Any outcome
prediction.
prediction?
Well, all I can say is the evidence is very, very strong that all of the other parties that did forecast estimates came very close to each other. So close to Dave Stoltz's estimate, that the other experts using somewhat different assumptions and methods, because there isn't one formula, but they arrived at the results that are very similar. Whereas CalAMs are somewhere between 30 and 40% higher by 2050.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And what's interesting is we're not all that far apart from CalAM if you took only their residential water use forecast based on population and their non-residential forecast based on the AMBAG growth rate and jobs. So, very, very similar. It's all these adders that change the demand forecast. And then, of course, we obviously differ on what's available from supply in dry years. But that's all we have on this. And as Dave Laredo pointed out, the reply briefs are all due simultaneously at the end of May. So that's what we'll be working on next.
Unfortunately, it takes a long time for cases like this for a decision to be drafted, right? Right, Dave and Fran?
Yeah, hopefully we'll see something by July.
So,
yeah, so we can move to item 3, which...
Well, we should find out if there's anyone from the public that wants to speak to this.
Thank you. Absolutely. Can we go out to the public, please, Sarah?
Chair Paul, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Okay, on to the third item.
So this third item...
the ASR rehab.
Exactly. Maureen Hamilton is with us. Maureen, you want to introduce this one?
Sure. Good afternoon. As you all remember, in March, we experienced a drop in capacity at the ASR wells. The board at the March board meeting directed staff to pursue getting quotes for the rehab. So the wells need to be what's called, I'll step it back, I apologize. The wells need to be rehabilitated, which involves some mechanical brushing of the screens, some chemical to kill the biology, and then putting the well back together. Due to the lack of legally available water supply on the peninsula, we feel it's an emergency situation. It needs to be done quickly, and it needs to be done. Looks like we're going to be injecting through the end of the injection period, and John can correct me if I'm wrong. So soon after,
no, he's shaking his head.
Good. As soon as we can get the drillers in May 31st, we'd like to start the rehab as soon as possible in order to make sure that the wells are available next winter. We got staff put together specifications and issued it to 3 drillers who work in the area. All 3 drillers responded. The lowest price driller estimate was about $300,000. Majora Brothers has done rehabilitation work on large injection wells in the recent past. They're fully qualified. They estimate that they can mobilize on June 3rd, which is very much appreciated. We have a 3-day weekend before that, so they're ready to roll on that. And we estimate about based on the schedule of values they sent, we think about $70,000 could be spent this fiscal year. So this would involve a transfer within the water supply fund from one ASR category to another. The ASR category that we would be transferring from was the land easement, which didn't come to fruition this year. So we have the funds available for this fiscal year, and in the next fiscal year, it's fully budgeted. Staff is requesting the $303,000 plus a 10% contingency for just over $330,000. And we ask that the committee provide direction on taking this item to the Finance and Administrative Committee. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Maureen. That was really clear, and so was your written memo, very clear. I have just one question, and that was just the explanation of the inspection. And do we have a schedule for inspection, maintenance, replacement for these wells? And if so, I mean, you don't need to give me details, but do we have a inspection and maintenance plan for these wells?
Absolutely. A huge part of the inspection is how well the well is performing. There's something, and actually I'm going to ask John, do you want to, he's the hydrogeologist, and this is really his area of extra.
Oh. I think you're muted, John, somehow. Maybe turn up the sound button on your
better?
computer. Yes.
Okay, great. My Zoom and Teams hand off my peripherals without my permission sometimes. But yeah, Maureen's absolutely correct, and I'd be happy to expand. Is that you track different parameters of how the wells are performing as they inject, and as well as you track the water quality that you are injecting into the wells, and as well as the water quality of the wells when you perform your backflush maintenance. So they're hard to have on a hard schedule because the use of them are driven by climate. So what you really do is you just watch the performance of the wells, and if you're going through a drought, they're not going to wear out as fast as if you're going through multiple wet years. And so it's something that, by rule of thumb, maybe every 10 years you'd want to rehab a well if it was just being used as a normal well. But these, I think ASR2, what were you telling me, Maureen? It hadn't been rehabbed since 2010 or 11, I think.
2015.
2015. No, I'm sorry, ASR2. I think it was, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. 2010 is what the memo says.
2015 may have been ASR1. My apologies.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Okay. Thank you. I was just, it's good to know that
but
that you have a way of dealing with the necessary, staying on top of the needed maintenance.
And then there's that's the performance of the wells and the pumps, but there's the motor, and that's the thing that can be tested on a regular basis, where you hook it up to you have electrical equipment that you hook it up to, and you just check the resistivity in the motor, and you make sure that that it's still good. So that there's the electrical side of it, which you can check regularly, and we do, but then there's the mechanical side of the injection of the well, which is performance based.
Thank you, John. Good. Well, I want to thank you, Maureen, for handling this on an emergency basis so efficiently, so quickly. It's great. Do other members of the committee have questions?
So
Mark?
they're more financial, so I'm sure the Finance and Administration Committee would would cover this. But forgive my ignorance, Maureen, is there a sort of some significance attached to calling this an emergency for budgeting purposes? And I assume the follow-up question is that looks like the majority of the Majora costs would be in the next fiscal year, so we'll be budgeting that into the next fiscal year. And how does the fact that this is an emergency now affect the majority of Majora's billing being budgeted in the next fiscal year? Do you know what I mean? In other words, when you get to the budget for the next fiscal year and you're saying, here's what's going to be paid in the next fiscal year, the fact that it was an emergency kind of falls away, right? Because now you budgeted for it. And those are my questions, I guess.
Well, so the emergency status from a budget standpoint would just mean that we are going to have to transfer funds at a mid-year or end of year budgeting process. Because this happened in March, we were able to get money in next year's budget. We thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have to rehab these wells. And at that time, we figured 400,000 would cover it. And we came in significantly below that, which is great. So there is a line item in next year's budget. Because this is such a long process, the rehabilitation process, and because we hit it so close to the end of fiscal year, the fact that we were able to budget or put money in next year's budget doesn't affect the emergency status. It's just the way the timing worked out. Does that answer the question?
I guess so. I just didn't know if there was any significance attached to it being an emergency. That's all. I just didn't know.
Well, it gave us greater flexibility in getting quotes and then choosing a contractor. If we had to put together a full bid packet and go out to bid, we'd probably still be out, into the later part of this month, and they wouldn't probably be able to mobilize until best case late June or sometime in July. So it helped with the schedule.
I see. That answers my question.
Well, thank you very much, all who worked on that and got it done. And is there a motion to? Well, I guess let's go out to the public first before we entertain the motion. If there's any member of the public who wants to speak, please raise your hand now or let us know.
Chair Paul, I see no raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Then do we have a motion to refer this to the Finance and Admin Committee for their review?
Do we need a motion on that?
It's only a discussion item, so it will go to, it'll go to the FAC anyway next week.
Okay, very good. Then hopefully we'll move forward with this after their review.
And Maureen, coordinate with Sarah to get your staff note revamped for finance and administration.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Brings us to item 4.
The update on Pure Water Monterey expansion.
And I think the written update we'll just let stand as it is in the package. I do want to add 2 things. The schedule has not changed. And you can see that if you got yours in color, blue is the advanced water purification facility work that's taking place basically up at the factory. And then the green is the injection well field work that's taking place up the hill from our ASR facility. And the injection wells are the longer completion time. And you can see that we're still on track to be through the punch list and closeout by October of 2025, with first water deliveries before that. So I think we're looking pretty good right now. I'll say we're still on schedule. The second thing is that CalAm did get permission from the school district to construct extraction wells 1 and 2 right on the Seaside Middle School site that where their backyard and track area butts up against the Bayonet Black Horse Golf Course. So they should be mobilizing to do that, I believe, sometime in June. So that's a real positive outcome as well.
And do we know how long that's going to take? I mean, is it possible that could hold up the estimated completion date of the project?
No, I don't think that will hold it up. The 2 wells that are located at the Army's Fitch Park site is going to take some more negotiating and a little longer. So we may still be a little constrained on extraction capacity when the plant starts up, but we will be in a position to deliver. They will have additional capacity to produce. The bigger question is going to be, when will we get ASR 3 and 4 back to the business of ASR rather than remaining as a production well couplet. So, but at least
very good.
positive.
Dave, will you? Yeah, it's very excellent news. And I assume you're planning to include this in your general manager's report at the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Right. It's for so the public gets an update too, and it'll continue with the updates for this committee also. Also would like that. Questions or any items to put on the agenda of future meetings of this committee from anyone, either staff or committee members? Okay, well, if something occurs to us, I guess we will let you know.
Yep.
So we did, I'm sorry, and going back to the expansion memo. Did we get all the money from all those grants, the 42 million, or are they?
Yeah, we're still getting it. Yeah, they're all reimbursements.
Right.
So as the spending occurs, then we get billed, and then for our 2 grants, and then we go to either division. You know, the Department of Water Resources has the 1 grant for about 11 million, and then state revolving fund is managing the 4.8 million that came through the governor's budget 2 years ago.
Oh, so they're handling that and the 15 million.
Yeah, so Maureen keeps tabs on it, and then actually Simona here will, I don't know, Maureen, are you filing the reimbursement request, or is Simona doing it?
Simona's got that completely.
Yeah. So, and
she's good at that. She's good at that. She did that pretty well for us for the emergency relief.
Yeah, for FEMA. So
we're not experiencing the long waits that we've had in the past.
Correct.
That is excellent news.
It's still a couple month lag. So I know Nishil's not on this call, but we've had discussions about what will we do if, and this is on well number 6. So our $4.8 million grant in the governor's budget, we artfully worded an additional injection well as a drought resiliency project, so we can inject more water when more water is available. So that's what was funded. And so right now, as they begin to do the injection well project, at some point I'm worried that Monterey One Water will get smart and start sending over a request for immediate payment on well number 6, and then we have to turn around and then go to the state, and so we'd be the bank. To date, they haven't asked us to be the bank, and so we're playing the float on them instead of them playing the float on us. But those expenditures should be increasing quite a bit right now as they're out there drilling.
Very good. Okay, unless there's anything further, we can adjourn. Thank you very much to staff.
Thank you.
And thanks to our lawyers for the great work on that supply and demand, and our expert witnesses.
And Fran's on the line, so I'll accept it on her behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fran.
guys. Take it easy.
Appreciate it.